All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Scott Thorley with Automotive Management Solutions, and this is the webinar for a training on the Shop Performance Report. This is the new version of the Shop Performance Report. We are now up to version 32, significant enhancement over the previous one. So I wanted to take this opportunity to go over with you guys a couple of the key features and a couple Excel just kind of tips and tricks that may make your usage of this report even more effective. I have here the shop performance report, and before I go any further, there's a toolbar at the top that Excel has. There's a little up caret over here. I like hiding that so it disappears. If you ever need to bring it back, you can view it and click the pin, but I like getting it out of the way. It gives us a little more room. When you first get the shop performance report, especially this new version, we've changed the licensing so it works really well. You get an email from us with some instructions. The instructions are basically going to say, save this file to your desktop as long as your computer is running Excel 2007 or later. And then you need to just take one step. You go to the very last tab, which is the parameters tab. The database location should automatically be filled in with your computer's configuration setting to the database. So it's already filled in, but it hasn't actually updated the spreadsheet yet. So after you go to this page, verify that path is correct, and then click this button that says update report with parameter changes. And you'll get a message saying those changes have been made. The only real issue we've seen is sometimes in Excel, when you first load it, you'll get a message up here at the top that says something about can't run content or can't run macros. Do you want to enable those macros? You do have to select that and say enable the macros, or it won't. When you go to the parameters tab, it won't automatically get your database location. So when you open it up, make sure you say yes, enable any content. If you get those messages, go to the parameters tab, click the update button, and you should be good to go. There's a couple more settings in the parameters tab. We'll come back to those later. So the first tab is the dashboard. So we've designed this to give you some of the most common key performance indicators or KPIs for your shop all on one page. So you start off with a date range, and I have a week in here. A lot of shops run this on a weekly basis. Some run on a monthly. You can pick whatever date range you want. You can run it for a year. I always tell people if they're going to run it for a year, go get lunch and come back because it may take a while. But you can do any date range you want in order to analyze your numbers. So once you pick the date range, you click the refresh button. And for the purposes of today, I'm not going to go refresh all these pages. I've already refreshed them. But you'll put in the date range, click refresh. That's all you need to do. There's a couple sections on this first page. We have the sales information on the upper left. This gives you, very similar to your R-Writer summary report, your part sales, labor sales, tire sales, which you can break out tires in your summary report, your tire labor sales, which in R-Writer you can make any labor operation designated as tire labor. Some people use that, some people don't. Sublet sales, and then discounts and package discounts. These are specifically if you have a customer set up for an across-the-board 10% discount, or if you use package pricing on things like your oil changes. Now, we frequently get a question about these numbers compared to the R-Writer summary report. The big difference to understand is in the R-Writer summary report, this discounts number is already included in these numbers. So when you run your summary report, it'll say these sales numbers include discounts of this amount. So you don't want, if you want to look at your overall numbers, you don't want to take your sales numbers from the summary report and then reduce it by the discounts because they've already been reduced by the discounts. We have these two columns because the right-hand column, sales with discount, this is how the R-Writer summary report displays it. So if you want to compare this to your summary report, use this column on the right with the discounts already included above. The column on the left pulls the discounts out of these numbers and lists them separately. Then you have your total sales, shop supplies, sales with supplies. We added this coupons category down here. In R-Writer, the way that AMS recommends a shop handle discounts and coupons is to create a labor category for discounts and coupons, and then create individual labor operations for each promotion, $10 off, $29.95 oil change, whatever promotion you're going to do. create a labor operation for it and put it on the ticket. That way, one, you can track your marketing campaigns very effectively. And two, in this report, it breaks out. Now, we do break it out at the bottom because it is included up in these numbers. That's why we put it below your total sales. So your total sales number does include, in this case, $905 of coupons set up as labor operations in your RO Writer. And if you do that, but don't have a number here, we'll address that when we get to the parameters page. The middle box is margin information. So we got the sales numbers. Now let's look at costs and overall margin. So you can see, again, very similar to summary report, you have your sales numbers, your cost numbers, your margin numbers. Now you see these three gray boxes. They're gray because that's information we cannot pull from RO Writer. We don't know what your fixed cost is. We don't know what your service advisor payroll is, and that number is nowhere in RO Writer. The technician cost is in RO Writer, but it's an estimate. As most of you know, when I look at my labor cost up here, in RO Writer, labor cost is always calculated as billed hours times the technician's loaded labor rate that you set up in configuration. So it does not take into account hourly employees. It does not take into account actual overhead for healthcare and that kind of thing. It's a estimate number. It's a decent estimate, but it's an estimate. If, on the other hand, you have your actual technician cost from your CPA or from your accounting program, you can put it in this gray box. So watch what happens. Right now, this labor cost is $62.14. If I put in here that my actual cost was $6,400, as soon as I enter that, it zeroes out the technician cost from RO Writer. So it's saying, I know the exact number, so zero that number out. If you delete this or put it back to zero, the technician number goes back up here. The one thing that's important to know about these numbers is they're not pulled from RO Writer, so they're not going to update. So if you put something in here, you'll need to update it manually with information from outside RO Writer. The other thing to keep in mind is the date range. If you run this report for 1 week and you run it every week, you'd want your fixed cost to be a weekly amount. If you run this monthly or normally run it weekly and decide to run it monthly, make sure that you update your fixed cost with a monthly number. So again, they're gray, so you know they're different. They're not pulled from RO Writer. You have to enter external information in order to affect those. Okay, that's the margin information. Then over to the right, we have some additional key metrics. So these are other data points we wanted to pull out of RO Writer and put on this page. Most of you should be familiar with these metrics. Your car count, your average RO total, courtesy checks. Now this one is useful if your coach tells you, hey, you want to do a courtesy inspection on every vehicle or on almost all vehicles, and you put it on your ticket as a labor operation for the courtesy inspection, you can track that. In this case, this shop was not doing that, so this shows up as zero. We'll again talk about that with parameters, but this should be able to show you, you can quickly see of my car count, how many did I perform courtesy checks on. Next one is tire units. So anything sold in your tire parts department should show up here as a tire unit. Custom part units, in this case, we set it up for batteries, and again, we'll talk in parameters, but you can pick any other parts department. This was specifically a request from a customer in Florida. Florida needed to see how many batteries were sold. So this, and for this shop, this example is batteries. How many labor hours were turned by your technicians? How many clock hours? Now, this will work if you use the time clock in RO Writer to clock techs in and out at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. This is the clock on the wall time. So if you use it in RO Writer, it will populate here. We give you a number of service techs, but I always tell people we're going to look down here for more detail. Gives you your overall effective labor rate, how many labor hours you have average per repair order, and any reopened tickets. We don't recommend reopening tickets. If you see a number here and you're not reopening tickets, you need to figure out why people are doing it, and we can see on the next page how to identify them. Okay, so let's jump to these new graphs, weekly trend analysis. So what we wanted to do is give you the ability to see some of these metrics, not just as a snapshot for this week, but how they are doing over time. So let me explain the total sales. If you look over to the left, this code 2016-4 means that it's the year 2016. It's the 4th week of the year. So that's the week I picked over here. So you'll notice the 41663 matches the 41663 up here. So that was my total sales for the week. 2016 week 3, it was 57,000. So we are down 28% from week 3. And then week 2 was 71. So we're down 42% from week 2. So you can quickly see the 3-week trend. Now, down below is a 10-week trend. So if I look at this last line, and a lot of this, if I hover my mouse over, I can see the data. This will show you your 10-week trend for this total sales number. I think I was hovering on the threshold. So you can see if I hover over this, it says 41,663. So this last bar is this week, last week, the week before, the week before, the week before. So you can see a 10-week trend going back in time. The red bar is a threshold bar. We have a button here, change thresholds, that will jump to it. It's very similar to the set goals on the key metrics. If you actually just scroll off to the right, you'll see these are the goals for the key metrics, which will turn them green, yellow, or red based on where you are in relation to the high and medium numbers. And then these are your threshold goals for the trend graphs. So if you have a target, like in this case, the threshold is set at 25,000. So you see this red line and you can see where your actual sales were compared to your target. So basically it allows you to set targets for these weekly trends. The other nice thing is these are dynamic. So let's say this one is RO count. Well, I don't want to look at RO count. I can click the drop down and notice so the drop down wasn't there until I clicked on it. If I click on RO count, I get a drop down. This drop down allows me to pick a bunch of different metrics. Let me do tire sales. So it will dynamically update and show me the, not units, but the actual dollar amount for tire sales for the last 10 weeks. And I didn't have a threshold set up on this one, which is why you don't see a red bar. But you can pick any of these metrics and update these charts for the last 10 weeks. Now, this is a weekly trend analysis. You actually have a button over here that I can change this to daily. And now this shows me by day for the last 10 days. So again, depending on what you want to look at, you can look at this daily or you can look at it weekly. And the daily trend, by the way, skips days with 0. So if you're not open on Sunday, it's going to skip Sunday to not mess up the data with that. So I'll set that back to weekly. And then over on the right-hand side, we have 2 charts. One is your top 5 service writers, service writer analysis. So you can see your service writer, the number of ROs, their total sales, their average RO, and their margin. So very easy to compare your service writers. Most places in this report are drill downs. So for example, if I want to see Mitch's 6 tickets, I can actually just double click here and a new window pops up. This is the 6 tickets with Mitch as the service writer. So very easy to drill down. I can see the actual RO number. I can see details. Very easy to drill down and get more data. If you'll notice on the bottom of the screen, all these tabs have names except for this new one that's called Sheet 3. Anytime I do a drill down, I right click on that sheet and then select delete. It's going to ask me, am I sure I want to get rid of it? Yes, because I can just double click and create it again if I want to. So very easy way to drill down and see that information. The bottom chart is the labor analysis. This should show you your techs. It should show you your billed hours. And again, if you use the RWriter clock feature, you'll see their clock hours here. And if you use the called the tech time clocker, you actually have your techs clocking in and out of jobs, individual labor operations. It'll show their elapsed time over here, so you can see some of your tech numbers. Now, some people use an external time clock. Well, it's very easy in here. If I know Mike worked 40 hours last week, I can just type in 40, and it'll do the efficiency calculation for me. So even if you're not using RWriter, you can manually fill this in if you want. All right, that is the dashboard. I guess any questions? Does anybody have any questions on the data you can get from this dashboard? I got a question from Cheryl about, can we use the computer and phone with the class? I'm not sure what your question means. Hopefully you can hear me. You should be able to dial in. I think there is a phone number in the options with any meeting. I apologize. It is going to be recorded, so if there is any questions, you can always ask them. You can always watch the recording later, or you can ask the messages in the chat. Question, in the trend analysis, can we compare to a previous year? This is not currently set up to compare to the previous year. What you'd wind up having to do is run this for this year, take a snapshot, and hopefully everybody knows about the snipping tool. I save this to my taskbar. It's the greatest thing in the world anytime you want to screenshot. So if I wanted to compare this to last year, I would click on this, gives me a news capture, and I would do this, and I would copy those trends. Now I have a copy of those trends. I would go ahead and run this report for last year. And you have to be a little careful, because if I use the exact same dates, January 17th through the 23rd, it may not be like a Monday through Saturday. It may wind up being like Wednesday to Wednesday. So you just need to look at the date ranges and make sure you pick the same week. But I would run it for the same week the previous year, and then use the picture I took and compare it to this year's data. All right. I'm going to go on to the next page. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat box. So the next tab is the RO detail tab. So this one is all the information you could ever want. It pulls every RO from the time period and gives you a bunch of data. Now, I've shrunk my customer field and address and phone number just so I don't have that data shared, but it's obviously it'd be stretched out on yours. A couple things to note: if you ever see this pound sign, that just means that the number's too big for the field. And if you go to the top of that column, on the line in between K and L, it turns into a little double arrow, and I make that a little wider, it fills that number in. So for every repair order, this shows you all kinds of information: the customer, the marketing source that you put in. So if you're entering sources for your tickets, it'll show up here. The service writer, vehicle year, make, model, total sales on this ticket. And then a couple of versions ago, we added, this is the total visits for this customer for their lifetime of your shop and the total spend. So it's very easy to see this customer is a great longtime customer. This customer, it was their second visit. So I may want to make sure I recognize them and treat them like a new customer or second-time customer. Here's another new customer down here. So very easy to see who your new customers are and who your long-term, very good customers are. Going across, we have address, city, state, zip, phone, email, and then a lot of breakdown on the tickets, part sales, tire sales, shop supplies, discounts, effective labor rate, profit center. Here's the reopened tickets. So on the previous screen, if you had reopened tickets, you could sort or filter this by the reopened tickets to see which tickets they were, all the way out to your profit dollars and percentage per ticket. So the challenge with this screen is there's too much data. There's so much information. It's like, where do I start? Well, I don't recommend looking at this screen as in general and figure it out. I like filtering this screen. So this has done everything from, well, let's talk first how to turn on the filters, because we run into this. So if I want to filter by a certain service writer, how do I do it? I don't see my little drop down arrow. If you don't have the little drop down arrow, you want to go up to the top ribbon and say data and filter. And when I do that, now you see all these little drop down arrows. So if I want to look at just Bobby's tickets, I can highlight Bobby, and now I only see Bobby's tickets. Now, one thing I want to point out at the top here, we added for this version the totals and the averages. Now, I did find out as in preparing for this training that the averages are not going to be correct if you filter something out. So they're correct when I have all service writers, but the averages aren't correct if you filter anything on this page. So we're working on a fix and we'll be rolling that out shortly. But I can do by service writer. I could look at, I want to see, and I'm clicking select all to basically deselect everything. I want to see my Chevy and Chevy trucks. And boom, there's my Chevy and Chevy truck tickets. So lots of great data on this page. Some people want to do their marketing. I want to do by zip code. Well, I can say I want to see all my tickets from that zip code. Oh, I only had one. Let's see it from this zip code. So you can look by zip code how many tickets you had and what your total sales are, and soon to be the average for that. And we put the average at the top. You can actually get them very easily. If I look at this total sales column, it shows me 913.97. If I click in the field, you see this drop down arrow show up. I can say I want the average. So the average is $228 for tickets in this zip code. So lots of great information on this page. Now, one thing to be aware of is once you filter this out, if I go back to the dashboard, all of a sudden my sales numbers and cost numbers are very small. It is using the filters on the RO detail tab to display this information for what you have filtered out. And it doesn't affect the charts down here, but it does affect the sales and costs. So if you ever see numbers here that don't make sense, go to your RO detail tab, look across these drop down arrows, and when you get to zip, you'll see this filter symbol. That means something's filtered out. Just go in and clear the filter and you'll get everything again. And your dashboard is back to your total numbers. So lots and lots of detail on this RO detail page. But it's really something that you don't want to look at it in total. You want to be able to filter and sort. Another common thing is a source. I want to look at all my tickets that came in from the internet. And now I can look at just internet tickets. And if you don't know these codes, these are the codes behind the scenes in RO Writer. You can go into RO Writer configuration, repair order sources, and go through and see what your 2 or 3 digit codes tie to. All right. That is it for, let me turn off that filter. That's it for the RO detail tab. Anybody have any questions on this page? Oh, let me go back actually and show one thing on the dashboard, a fix. And again, we'll have this fix as well. If you guys click this drop down for the service writer, you can filter out specific service writers. Sometimes you have a big long list where it'll actually show 50 different service writers for every time I've run this report. If you do have a long list here or 2 or 3 other places, I'm going to show you the process. Don't worry about remembering it. You can always watch this video to see it, but you basically right click on the name field, pivot table options, data, number of items to retain per field, set this to none. And if you do that, it'll get rid of the long list of people that aren't related to you. So again, it's recorded in the video. I'm happy to send you instructions as well if you have any questions afterwards. So question, when you want to point out when filtered that it shows which column is filtered, I believe if you go to print this page, if you look for the filter symbol, I think you should see this filter symbol. But I'd have to check that and see exactly how that works when you print it out. A good question on the printing though. Some of these pages have a lot of detail, and some of them have a lot of detail like down at row 1000 where we do some of the calculations to fill in the tables. When you go to print, this is an Excel trick. If you go to page layout and print area and set print area, this allows you to say which area I want to print. So let's say I don't want all the fields, but I want these columns. I would highlight these columns, do page layout, print area, set print area, and now it's just going to print those. It's not going to print the whole page and make it really small. So page layout, print area, set print area, that is your friend in terms of being able to print this out in a way that's shows the data that you want without having too much on the page. All right. Let's go to the next tab, which is decline. This is one of the brand new tabs. We're really excited about this one. This box pops up, and I want you to be very careful about this because we actually have an option in the parameters to turn this off, but I want to make sure you understand what it means. When we hit refresh before, it refreshed the dashboard, RO detail, and the daily summary tabs. It did not refresh decline, parts, labor, or customers, okay? Because if we refreshed them all every time, it would take a long time every time you refreshed. And a lot of these, like the decline, is probably useful to have a bigger date range. So it does carry over the date range that we refresh the dashboard, January 17th to 23rd, but note that this report I actually ran for the entire month of January. So it says this date range, but it's still showing me the data from the last time I ran this. It's easy the first time you do it because it has some of our garbage data in here and you know it doesn't make sense. But when you start running this on a weekly basis, the data is going to look valid. It's going to be your service writers' names, etc. So when you see this pop up, I want you to remember that when I come to this page, I need to click refresh again or set a different date range and click refresh, but it has to have its own refresh for the data to be valid. So you'd go ahead and click refresh. I'm not going to do it because I did this for the month of January. The top left, we have a weekly chart of the average estimate presented to customers. So what we mean by that, we use the word estimate, but it's a repair order, but it's a combination of the sold work and declined work. Previously, we weren't able to use the declined work. One of the big updates for this version was including the declined information. So let's look at what this tells me. It shows me by week. So for this last week of January, my average estimate to the customer was $409.09. So that means what I presented to him, the work that we sold and the work that we presented to him, but he declined, was $409. The red dot, and so the 409 uses this chart over here. The red dot uses the scale on the right-hand side. If I hover my mouse over it, you can see that the value is 69.30%, which you can kind of visually see, but if you want the exact number. This says that my conversion rate for this week was 69, almost 70%, which means I presented 409, I sold 70% of it. And you get to see a trend, so you can see that, the beginning of January, our estimate was higher, but our close rate was slightly lower. So it gives you a really good scorecard. Now, this also has a little drop down up here. This allows you to run it by service writer. So if I just want to see what Bobby did, I can see Bobby's numbers. If I wanted to see Scott. So you get the idea. You can run this by service writer and compare them. Or the all basically shows all service writers. The middle chart shows decline by labor category. So this allows you to see what labor category did you present to the customer, and it's by dollars, how many dollars. And I think we're going to take this RO count on here. It's kind of a weird thing because of the way RWriter counts declined work. So for now, ignore the red line on the RO count, but just look at the amounts. So I can see that for, no filters on. So I have all service writers, all technicians. We presented 13,449 of engine work that was declined by the customer. And you can see all the different categories. So the filters at the top allow me to, again, pick specific service writers. I can pick specific technicians. And this tells me I only want to see declined. I could turn on both declined and sold. I could look at just sold, but very easy with these filters to change the data that you're looking at. There's a question on actual estimates versus repair orders. This is just looking at repair orders, not your estimates or your saved work on estimates. So it's only looking at closed repair orders with what was sold and what was declined. The right-hand chart, we tried to do it by parts department group, but in doing this, we actually found a lot of blanks, and it looks like it's more of an R-Writer issue. When you decline a part, it doesn't seem to save the parts department all the time. So don't worry about that chart. Below, we give you a bunch more detail. So this is, again, you could drill down and get to individual tickets, but for each service writer, for each week, we tell you how many ROs, what they sold, the labor that was declined, parts declined, total declined. So potential sale should be declined plus sold, your average estimate, and your conversion rate. So I like this last column, right? So I can quickly see for the service writers, what was their average estimate and what was their conversion rate. So I can see, for example, Scott Jones, his average estimates are very small, but he's closing almost all of them. I think it's going to be an oil change tack or something like, or an oil change. Service writer does a lot of oil changes. So anyway, very quick snapshot of their average estimate and their conversion rate. And we can thank Dave Murphy, for those of you who know him. He's the one who pushed us to include some of this declined information, and we think the result's pretty good. And then over here is estimated work by technician. The only thing to know about this chart is this is only going to show you the labor that they put on a ticket that was declined. It's not going to include the parts. You do have another nice filter up here where I can see, if I do this, this is how much work that they sold on a ticket. If I check both of them, this is all the work that was sold and presented. If I just do the yes, meaning if the declined is yes, this is the amount of work they put on a ticket that was declined. All right. Any other questions on the decline tab? Hopefully you guys all find this as useful as we do. All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. A lot of stuff to cover, and I don't want to keep you here all day. Next tab is the parts tab. Again, you get the reminder comes up saying refresh this separately. This is similar to what we had in the previous version, at least all the data below. We did add two charts that we thought were very good data for you. The part sales by department. In our writer, so one, we highly recommend that you use the departments for your parts. It helps with all this reporting and tracking. But this shows you your total sales by department as the blue line, and the red line is your margin for that department. So this one chart is a huge tool for you to see where am I selling the most parts and what is my margin in those categories. You can see in here, this shop has a number of separate tire categories, and so those are going to have lower margins on their mechanical parts. They're getting 50%. All the way down to their synthetics, they're getting 69%. So nice snapshot. Takes a bunch of data that you can get in our writer, but without seeing it in a chart form, I think it's much harder to interpret. If you have a coach, show this to your coach. They'll be able to use this information to help you identify and optimize the pricing you're using in your shop. The chart on the right is part cost by supplier. So not what you sold it for, but what you paid for it, by who you paid for it. So this is very useful if you want to talk with your suppliers and say, look at how much money I'm spending with you. You could show them this chart and they can see, if you showed this to American Tire, they can see that, by far they're your top vendor, so they should treat you correctly. And then down here is all the parts detail. There's a number of different things you can do here. One of the things that let me just talk about is just using this chart, because this can get confusing and sometimes look different ways. Think of this as a expanded out folder. So MP stands for mechanical parts, which includes all these different individual parts, how many times they were sold, sales, cost, etc. If I double click on this field with mechanical parts, it's going to shrink the next category. So if I do this, they all disappear. Well, they're actually there, but instead of calling them out individually, it shows I sold 37 total. My margin for this whole category is 50%. So if you see a blank, don't think it's blank. Realize it's just collapsed from the previous thing. Now, the most confusing one can be that if somehow the part description gets collapsed, so watch what happens when I double click on the fuel tank. Oh, that one actually didn't do it. Let me do it this way. If I double click on MP, it actually collapsed that. So again, it looks like it's blank, but it's not really. So I'm going to double click here, expands that out. I double click here, expands that out. Now let's say, okay, this is all expanded out. I don't want that. I want to collapse it. So there's a number of different options that you get with these drop downs. And actually, I don't want to filter it out. I want to sort it. So I'm actually going to right click on the department name, and it's going to give me options for expand and collapse. And I'm going to collapse entire field. So if I do that now, all my parts departments, I'm looking at by department, and I can look at my sales numbers, and I can look at my margins by department. So very effective to condense the view, and then you can easily double click on one of these to expand it out. You can double click here to get to the actual ticket that it was sold on. So this is very useful. If you have a promotion for which service writer sold the most flushes, you can do this report, go into your flushes, double click the total sold, and it'll show you sold, including the service writer that sold it. So lots of good information here. You just got to know that when you see something blank, it's not really blank. It's usually just collapsed. All right, any questions on the parts page? All right, I'm going to go on to the labor. So labor works almost identically to parts. Again, you get the reminder. So when you come here, you should refresh it for the date range you're looking for. We start off with this labor sales by category. So this shows you, and again, so there's no declined in here now. This is actually your sold labor. I want to see what my top 20 categories were in dollars, which is the blue bar, and how many times it was on a ticket in the red bar. So you can see they have a lot of tire tickets, a lot of menu items, and a lot of state inspections. Not a lot of engine tickets, but the ones they have are very high dollar value. So anyway, just a good picture so you get an idea. We always talk about you're a labor-based business. So you want to look at the labor and see where you're getting the work done, what's driving people into the shop, and use this page to look at your labor and see what's going on. Over to the right, we have labor hours by week for all technicians. And again, I could select individual technicians if I wanted to, but this shows you, so if I looked at this trend, I'd be a little concerned. I had two decent weeks, but a downward trend, and the last 2 weeks have been slower. So just gives you an idea of your trend by week. And then down at the bottom, same kind of chart we did for parts. This time we're on the labor side. One of the things that we talk about on this page that's really, really useful is I'm going to go down to their discounts. I think there's another one. Let's go back up. Here it is, customer rewards. So under their customer rewards category, they have Bobby Bucks, okay? So Bobby Bucks were $660 negative, right? So he gave away $660 for these, and I can see that he did 66, so they're $10 each. Now, I say that, but it's very interesting. A bunch of times when I run this report, it does not, you have a $10 off coupon that was used 10 times, but the dollar value is not 100, it's 150 or 100 or 200. So sometimes they're using a $10 off coupon, but they're giving away more than $10. So it's good, quick math to see if they're actually doing the right amount. But okay, so Bobby gave away $660. So was it worth it? Well, how can I tell that? Well, I want to see how big the tickets were that he gave away this money on. So I can double click on the 66, and it opens up another page with the RO number, tech, service writer, sales, a bunch of information. So I'm going to look at the total sales, which is column F. I'm going to go to the bottom, I'm going to click here, and again, this is a little Excel trick. I'm going to click here and do an auto sum. Now it defaults to adding it all up. So I don't want the total, I want the average. So if I click this drop down, I can look at the average. Well, hey, here's a $712 average ticket that he's giving away $10 a ticket on. I think that's pretty good. So any promotion you do, I highly recommend you do this analysis to see, are you getting the value for this promotion? And again, this is a breakout sheet, so it says sheet 4. So when I'm done, I'm going to right click and delete it. All right. So that's labor. Any other questions on the labor tab? So there's one question. Somebody doesn't seem to have the tech filter in the upper left. I'll have to work with you on that, Todd, and see why that's not showing up. You should have that box. Make sure you don't have that enable content message at the top. That would definitely could cause that issue. And Ron, I see your question. I'll check with you as well. It may be that we released version 30, we updated to 31, we've now updated to 32. I think there's still a handful of you that are on version 31. So if you do have the version 31 at the top, I can send you an updated version that'll have this. The labor hours by week was a recent addition. All right, so let's go to the customers tab. This was another version that, or another tab that we had on the old version, but we really tried to say, what else can we give you on the customer that will help you, what are the frequent questions we get from you? What will help you analyze your business? So we still have the customer list in the middle with the total amount spent, sorted by total amount spent for this date range. I turned off the email address on this one, but you can turn on the phone and email. Actually, let me just show you that real quick, how you would do it. If you click anywhere in this chart, and there's a bottom option called Show Field List. This field list is everything I could turn on. Now, if I turned it all on, you'd have to move these charts over, they'd get pushed over. But I could have the zip code, I could have the vehicle make or model, I could have when their last visit was, so I could have their email. So you can turn on any of the tables that are available here, you can turn on in that chart. So if you wanted to turn on email, that's where you do it. So in addition to the customer data itself, we wanted to say, hey, we always get asked about new customers. How many new customers came in last week? How many new customers came in last month? So I ran this report also for January 1st to January 31st. So this shows you a week-by-week view. The blue line is the sales on new customer tickets, and the red line is how many new customers were there. So 23 the first week, 21, 15, 16. So very easy week over week to see how many new customers I had. Now, what if in this chart I wanted to see, which one of these customers was a new customer? We added this first visit filter at the top. So right now, all means whether it was a first visit or not a first visit. I'm going to say I want first visit to be yes. And now this is a list of your first-time customers. So not only can you see how many, you can very quickly get a list of your first-time customers. So interesting question, can we change it to existing customers? No, although if you ran this by week, you could easily see, I think at the bottom here, it says there were 75 total over the 4-week time frame. If I flip this around and said no, so it's not their first visit, these are my existing customers, and there was a total of, sorry, I'm scrolling through here fast. There was a total of 681 existing customers. So I would have to do this by week, but if I did it by week, it would show me how many existing customers I had per week versus new. For this time frame, I did it for a month, so it's showing me existing customers for the month versus the new customers. The other thing we added is sales by zip code. So this, I think, is also very important because it gets into some of your advertising campaigns. Am I going to do weekly flyers? Am I going to do postcards? Well, this shows you what zip codes you have business coming in from. So again, just a quick snapshot picture of your highest performing zip codes in your area. All right. Any other questions on the customer page? So I got a question about graph here, customer by source. That's a really good request. We used to have a source on the dashboard that we found not a lot of people used, but I think you're right. I think if we could add something with source on this tab, that'd be a good idea. So please keep bringing those kind of ideas to us. I will look at adding a marketing source chart on this customer page. Now, one thing, and it's beyond the scope of today's call, but the RO detail tab has the customer source. So if you really wanted to do it, I could highlight and cut and paste this data into another Excel spreadsheet. This isn't locked down like it used to be in the old version. I could cut and paste this whole RO detail table into another Excel spreadsheet, and then I could, if you know Excel, I could create a pivot table or create a graph using the source that's here. So the data is here. You can manually create it, but we will also look at creating one for that customer tab. But I just want to let you know the data is all there, so you could do it on your own. It just takes a little bit of advanced Excel knowledge. The last tab is a daily summary. This again was one from the old one. I don't know that a lot of people used it, but we left it in here. It's the only place you can get a day-over-day view of your R writer. What was your RO count, total sales, parts, labor, etc., and finally your profit by the day. Some people use this to look at, should I stay open on Saturdays? So I wanted to see what kind of business I was doing on Saturday. And all of these are drilled down. So if I clicked on the 37 or double clicked on the 37, it would show me the 37 tickets for January 21st. This can sometimes be good if you sold a lot of tires or had a big discount for one day. You might want to go look at those tickets and see what's going on. All right, and then the last page is the parameters. So I mentioned this early on. When you put the report on, it should automatically point to your database location. You can click update. But here are the other settings. So your tire department group code goes here. And down at the bottom here, I showed you how to get it. So in R Writer, if you go to configuration, parts, part department groups, select your tire group, and you get the code, and then I put that code in here. And this is where I did batteries. This is my courtesy check category. This is my coupon category. Profit centers, we get a lot of people in R Writer. When you run any reports, you can run them for any one profit center or all profit centers. Well, a lot of people wanted to run reports for all of them except for their employee profit center. So all you need to do on this is, let's say I remove 6 from this comma list. Now profit center 6 will not show up anywhere in this report. It's all filtered out. So if you do have a profit center for wholesale or for employees or anything that you don't want to display, you can just remove it from the profit center. Now, along those lines, on the RO detail tab, we do have profit center, so that the other way of doing it is, here it is you could leave all the profit centers in here, but go to the RO detail tab and say, I don't want to see profit center 7. So both ways work. Just depends on if you want it completely gone from your spreadsheet or there, but you filter it out. This display the date parameter message, this is that refresh message on the 4 pages. We originally put it here, so if it really annoys you, you turn it off, but I really would not do it until you get familiar with the fact you have to refresh those pages every time you go to them or you're seeing outdated information. And if we send you a new version, so I talked about that, if there's one or two things we're going to fix, so we'll probably have a version 33. So what we're going to do is we're going to email you version 33. You should be able to put it on your desktop, go to this parameters tab. It should find your database and you can click update. The only thing you'll need to do is you can open up this version 32 and look at your settings here. And again, probably the profit centers and date you don't need to worry about, but look at these middle 4 sections and you can just copy and paste them over to the new version. Or you can look it up again. Either way works. But when we send you a new version, the only things you should need to update are these 4 records. Update them and then click the update report button. All right, so we're almost up to the hour. Went through a lot of stuff. I know there's a lot of detail, so I'm really glad we're able to record this. You can kind of watch sections that you care about later. There's a question on how do you change the date range for the daily summary. So when you do the dashboard refresh, this box that pops up tells you we're going to refresh the data on the dashboard, daily summary, and RO details. So this date range, when you run it, is actually going to refresh the dashboard page, the RO detail page, and that daily summary. So don't try to change. I think there might be a date at the top of that page. Don't try to change it there. You refresh the dashboard, and that's what refreshes the daily summary page. Any questions on anything else in the report? The other thing I didn't even get to is, does anybody have an example of data that they'd like to get from their RO writer that they don't think they can, that I may be able to show you how to use this report to get the data? Does anybody have any examples they'd like to share? Very good question. The goal. So we talked about we could run this report weekly or we can run it monthly. Well, my fixed costs change. My goals will change because your goals are set based on that date range. So what do I do if I want that? Well, again, the licensing on this report is great. So what you could do is set this all up for weekly with weekly goals, weekly fixed costs, and then just do a file save as, and you can save that as shop performance report version 32 weekly, or shop performance report version 32 monthly. Okay, or you can shorten it to SPR. You can name it whatever you want. There's no, in the old version you couldn't really rename it, it caused problems. You can name this whatever you want. So you can have a weekly version, a monthly version, a yearly version, whatever you want to set up. But that way it's nice because if you run it for a week, you run the weekly version and all your thresholds and goals and fixed costs are correct. And you want to look at it monthly, you run the monthly version and all that information is in there. So there's a question on national averages. So it's not something we do today, but it is something that would be interesting if we've got all this information, if we come up with a way to allow you guys to maybe send it back to us or some kind of summary of the data so we could then roll it up and present back to you guys, based on all of the R-Writer customers using this. This is the average, ticket, the average labor hours, and some interesting data. So that's something we're thinking about. Don't have it available yet, but I think it would be useful information, and we'll keep you updated on any progress on that. Any other questions on anything in the shop performance report? Hopefully you guys are using it. Hopefully you're finding it useful. Question for tech costs, are you including loaded costs? Yes. So when we do this cost, we're pulling it from R-Writer. Everything in R-Writer is based on the loaded cost. So for those of you who don't know what I mean by that, in R-Writer, when you go to set up a technician, there is a cost number there. Well, if your technician is making $18 an hour, you don't want to put in 18 because it actually costs you more than 18 because you have payroll taxes, you have health care, you have whatever benefits you provide. So there's normally some kind of what they call a loaded cost, which is usually times, you take your labor rate times or the hourly rate times 1.4 or 1.3. Yeah, it depends a little bit on the benefits you offer, that kind of thing. But you put that loaded cost in R Writer. So everything in the shop performance report is based on that cost in R Writer, which should be a loaded cost. All right, any other questions? And just to clarify on that weekly versus monthly, if you save a copy weekly, save a copy monthly, you'll have two different icons on your desktop. So you just need to make sure you pick the right one. Question on where it's going to be recorded. We are going to, any meeting is what we use for the webinar. They provide the recording. I will be sending out, I will post it in the user group, a link to the recording of this webinar. And for those of you who aren't in the user group, one, you should get in the user group, but I will send out an email blast to everyone that I sent on the first email, and include the link to the recording so you're able to view this recording, even if you're not in the user group. And if you're interested in purchasing this report and you don't have it already, please contact AMS and we'd love to talk to you about it. All right. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to go ahead and stop the webinar, and you guys have a great day, and we'll let you know in about an hour or two when the recording's available. Thank you.